2, and this is going to be very interesting. To get real background on who Stephen Paddock was as a younger person is very interesting. This is going to play, I think, a key role in the study and evaluation of this fellow. We may not find out exactly what he was up to, who he was working with toward the end of his life, but it was, I think, far more interesting than we have been led to believe so far. One of the best journalists working in the world on the internet is Greg Palast. And Greg, believe it or not, went to school with Stephen Paddock. Paddock, Palast, sat at the same table in shop and one class. Greg, welcome back to the program. How are you?
Hey, I'm getting by, Mr. Rentz.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I guess that sums it up for a lot of us. When this happened,
the regime.
Yeah. When this happened, my friend of 20 years or whatever, how did that hit you? Did you say, wait a minute, that guy's got an interesting name? Nah, it couldn't be. How'd you find out?
Well, actually, pretty quickly, my producer of my film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, suddenly shot me a note saying the Vegas shooter, which I just heard about a couple minutes before, didn't you go to school with him? He was at your high school. But
how did he know?
There was some report, like immediately someone looked up, just some whatever type of info that, what they did, they looked through these there's these sites that list everyone in a high school yearbook.
I got you.
They can go find it. And so this is a typical thing that journalists do. They're looking for photos, right? And they mentioned his high school, and given his age, that he must have gone to school with him. I said, absolutely. In fact, from the second grade through our graduation, Steve, the guy is the Vegas shooter.
Yeah.
Steve and I were together from second grade through graduation together, and he was, I can't say I was a close buddy of his. In fact, I can't say anyone was a close buddy of his. He was a pretty quiet, closed-in kid. The big thing, he was a real math whiz, so I was in a lot of classes with him, for 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And
he had a brain.
Was I surprised? Yeah. Not at all.
Really? Oh, wait a minute now. This is interesting. As you look back on your childhood and going to school, and you put this together that's Steve, why didn't it surprise you? What was it about him as a youngster that would lead you to think that he could be accused of such an inhuman, heinous act?
Well, if you go to my site, gregpalast.com, you'll see the story I wrote. I went to school with the Vegas shooter.
Yeah, I got it running. Yeah,
and I also, that's actually it's a slight modification. I used some other names besides Steve in my book Vulture's Picnic. So I actually kind of wrote this story 6 years ago,
no
7
kidding.
years ago. And to me, it's not that I find it odd that Steve went berserk like this, and it is berserk and horrible. Yeah, absolutely horrible, and there's no excuse. And by the way, I can tell you why he did this, but I don't want anyone to misunderstand that I approve it in any way, that I find it excusable. Understanding is not in the least the same as approving, and so let's start with that. So because I get some people who've already written me stuff like, how could you, excuse? There's no excuses. Okay, it's understanding where we came from and what happened to people like Steve. What surprised me is that he's the first one I know who's created mayhem. I've been waiting for someone. If you read my writings, we both went to a school, as they point out, called with the fancy name of John H. Francis Polytechnic High School, and before that, and the other schools feeding into it. Uh-huh. Polytechnic is a fancy name for saying you ain't going to college, you're a loser. And we grew up in this place called Sun Valley. Now, Sun Valley may sound pleasant, but in fact, it is the anus of Los Angeles. And technically, that's where the sewage plant is. That's where the garbage dump is. That's where the LA power plant is. And it was burned coal when I was a kid. We could barely breathe. The school was at the time turning majority Chicano. Now it's about 90% Chicano.
Right.
That has something to do with this story. Steve and I were we're white kids. Steve's dad was, yes, it's been pointed out that Steve's dad was in prison until he escaped. What made that unusual is that his dad escaped. We had a lot of kids whose dads were in prison, and because I want to ask you, think about this a minute. We have 2 million people in prison. Where do you think their families end up? It ain't Beverly Hills, okay?
Yeah.
They end up at the end of the railroad tracks where I lived and where Steve lived.
Right.
And in fact, and not coincidentally, people say, where's Sun Valley? The answer is, tell me about Sun Valley, where we grew up. It's in my film that I've just released, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. In fact, next week we will be issuing the post-election update. And in that film, I go back to where I grew up in Sun Valley. I go back to my home, and I go back to in the kind of a, so it's not quite a shack in a bunch of weeds, and down San Fernando Road, where the guys who used to work at the GM Chevy plant and worked at the Lockheed plant, and those plants shut down. Now they used to have campers that they took on vacation. Now they live in the campers, and it's kind of semi-homeless along San Fernando Road. This is where you go to lose, and what we were set up to lose. Steve, we're both pushing 65, and or Steve was until he blew his brains out.
Yeah, he'll never make it to 65 now. No.
Right. He, in my opinion, and by the way, I'm going to be, listen, I wish he had made that decision about a half hour earlier.
Isn't that the truth?
To not take everyone with him. Why was he at this dead end? Why did he want to basically commit suicide but loudly take people with him? And the answer goes back, I think, you can't reach completely into someone's head. He was a math whiz, okay, and a really, really smart kid, really bright. But at Polytechnic, they had us, we took wood shop, we took metal shop so you could work a drill press at GM. We took electrical shop, and we took drafting so you could do drafting work, mid-level work at Lockheed. By the way, this reminds me of what Betsy DeVos wants to do, our education secretary. This is the old progressive education.
Oh, yeah.
They knew that the Chicanos and the poor white trash out in Sun Valley were never going to go to college. So why bother teaching them trigonometry when what they really need is really good skills? So, like I said, electrical, wood class. We had to learn tool and die making. That was a required thing. We had a lot of old jalopies in the school. It's a gigantic campus where you fix cars because you could learn auto shop, and that was one of our majors. You could major in auto shop, but what you couldn't get was calculus. You couldn't get the classes that you needed to apply to good schools if you had any brains, any real drive to go to a good school and do something. And so, you just didn't even have the classes to apply. So a kid like Steve, who should have been at least at UCLA and probably Stanford or MIT, was locked out because we didn't even have the classes that allow you to apply to these fancy schools. And so he ended up with his big brain going to the local college, that where you could get in basically open admission that cost next to nothing, and he got his basic degree so he could go work at Lockheed. I don't even think he got a bachelor's. I think it's a 2-year junior college, and so then he worked at Lockheed, frustrated. Lockheed closed in '88. He took the buyout, and because he was brainy, he took the money and put it in some real estate in Los Angeles and made a few bucks. On paper, he probably was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I read somewhere that he was worth $5 million. It was on Wikipedia. This is complete, absolute, total nonsense. He didn't have much, and even beyond that, Steve So he was, he lived in like the empty apartments in these crappy apartment buildings he bought up. And
I understand that. I read your article. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I got to ask you a question here. He didn't have that much money. He wasn't a rich, wealthy man, and yet he seems to have spent a hell of a lot of cash at the video poker games, among other games if you can call them games. Where did the money come from?
He was just recycling the same money. Well, he was getting rents from a couple of these crappy buildings he had, and I can tell you he was an addicted gambler, and I have had addicted gamblers in my family, and they are brilliant scammers. And remember, he had a very big brain. They could remortgage a little house 12 times. They could, there's always scams. And they said he was a professional gambler. No, he lost money, but the odds at video poker are like just the house takes less than 1%. So if you have any sharps, you can just keep it going. He apparently, and this again, because I lost track of him, like everyone lost track of him. His brother, talks about him a lot on TV, but hadn't really seen it for 20 years. At the casinos, they were saying basically he'd go up a little bit or down a little bit. Basically, he was always even. He would just play forever, and the house odds didn't eat him up. He just was able to stay even, and he played so much that they gave him these comp rooms. And you only get comp rooms ultimately if they figure you're a loser, because they don't give you comp. That's how it works.
Okay, Greg, I have a story. Can I send you a story?
Sure.
I got a story, and this guy's pretty smart who wrote the thing, and he claims that he was able to establish that Stephen Paddock lost almost $500,000 last year gambling in 2016, and it's a very compelling story. I'll send it to you.
Right. I would say, I agree that he was not a winner with it. And like I say, he had some assets which he basically gambled away. And I'm glad that you brought that up. How do we know it's $500,000 or just $50,000 after he gained back $450? But all I can tell you is he was a loser. And addicted gamblers over longer are going to lose out, and they're going to come to an end, no question. The question for me is that he had ended a long time before. He was dead but not buried years before. My point in my article is that this kid should have been something, and he spent his whole life angry and resentful of the kids who had the breaks. Because, if we were all in the unified Los Angeles school system, but if you went to Hollywood High, or you went to Pacific Palisades instead of our school, you didn't take drafting and electrical class. You didn't do tool and die making. You took AP French and AP and advanced placement math.
Yeah, I got it.
I want you to get it, because this is the core. They got the gold mine. We got the shaft. Now, now this is Greg Palast. I had some ultra luck, but I also had special routes out of that. Mm-hmm. I was a hustler, and I knew how to get around that. So I actually got into Stanford, by the way. I got into all the fancy schools and accepted to all the fancy. And how did that happen? That's a very different and weird story, but, it's about Greg Palast, hustler. All right? He used his brains, but he didn't find those same magic openings. He wasn't given the skull and bones handshake like I was, okay?
Yeah, you did it the hard way. But you earned it. You earned it.
Yeah, and so what happened is he ended up with a frustrated life, angry, resentful, and I cite, it's interesting, if he were black, if he were Palestinian, anything like that, everyone would say, oh, well, you got to go back to his childhood and why he did it. No one does that now, but you know what? I quote Langston Hughes, who wrote the poem Harlem about black rage. But it applies absolutely and perfectly to Steve. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it, dry up like a raisin in the sun? Does it stink like rotting meat? Does it sag like a heavy load? Or does it explode? And that's what this story is about.
You're talking about a
class war.
Yeah, you're talking about a lifetime of suppressed rage that you're saying smoldered there in his mind. Would you call him a prodigy or a genius or any of those terms as a youngster? Was he that gifted?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the problems. Mm-hmm. He wasn't, if he were in a different high school, if he were in a different area, if he weren't surrounded by Mexicans that they just wanted to throw into the GM plant and the Lockheed plant, he would have been, picked up by a good school, and that brain power would have been used, I hope, for something good. I hope he wouldn't have become a damn investment banker. But the thing is, this is class war. Class war has its victims like any war. Right. And in our school we had a lot of kids who went to Vietnam and didn't come back with all their limbs. Steve got out, I got out. I think I don't know what his was. I got a high draft number, okay? But George Bush, he wasn't a very bright student, but he got into Yale and he got into the Texas Air Guard. So it's the difference. The difference is that this is rage against the privilege pricks that go to these, that have all the privileges, and then like Donald Trump, sneer at what they call the losers.
Wow, that's pretty primitive for a brilliant young mind to have gone that far south.
Well,
pretty primitive.
You keep banging your head against the glass ceiling.
He didn't have much to bitch about. He had a good life, whether it was sparsely furnished homes.
Would you want that life? If you had that brain,
I'm not Steve Paddock.
That's not the point.
Yeah,
that's not the point. I mean, I got to tell you. Look, I just got off the phone a few minutes ago with one of our mutual friends from high school. Mm-hmm. Okay, and she's a friend of ours. In fact, we had a couple other friends. Because after this happened, a lot of us got together to say, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And you know what? Not one of us has taken a high velocity, weapon, a modified AR-15, and knocked out, dozens of people's lives. None of us have done that. Two of us have become musicians in Hollywood because it's down the road and in the studios. One of us tried to become a writer, didn't have the connects, didn't work. But I can tell you right now that we didn't all go out and shoot people, and I got very lucky. I spend my life trying to get the bastards who did this to us.
Yeah, I know.
As an investigative reporter, that's my commitment.
Yeah.
That's my thing, and that's how but you know what? I want to tell you, if you don't hear it in my voice, I hope you do.
Oh,
okay,
hear it.
This is 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm still angry about it. I'm still angry about it.
Yeah.
And I can tell you right now, and I once wrote, I use words because I don't like bullets. And I also think words are far more deadly against the real bastards who did this. I mean, that's what makes me sick. If he was angry, it wasn't those just kids having fun at just trying to have a good evening at a rock concert. Families were destroyed. When your kid gets murdered, it's not just the kid that loses their life; the family loses their life.
You got it.
It's horrible. But so we didn't. Not everyone who went to Poly did this. I'm just saying is that you got to understand it, and yes, he did have a horrible life compared to what he could have been or should have been. That's a real of some crappy slum building.
That's a psychopathic rage that continued to grow. If you had run into Steve 6 months ago, and you sat down with him and had lunch or whatever, what do you think that conversation would have been like?
I say, Steve, you got a big, giant brain. What the hell are you doing sitting in the dark 14 hours? I can use that brain. Work with me. You know that one of the guys that I graduated with, I just ran to him, he did. If you go to gregpalast.com and catch the trailer of The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, there's a kick-ass music track to that trailer. That was written by a friend of Steve and I, that I went to school with. He became a successful film musician and film composer. I mean, we didn't all, we figured out ways around and things, the life can work out.
Got it.
But you know what I said to my friend who could use a few more breaks, said, why don't you work with me on my film? I would have told Steve, I need brain power like yours. I go through all kinds of numbers to find, you know, when you're hunting billionaires, it's all about finance. I would have brought him right in. That's what I've done. I'd say, you're angry? Don't vote for Trump. Don't be a chump. Let's go get the guys let's go get the bad guys. Let's go get them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I would have said. Make something of your life. You know, you can't, I mean, let's face it. You can't, no matter what your circumstance, it doesn't help for you to destroy yourself or destroy others.
No, of course not.
And, you know, I mean, I'm not, so there, yes, to some extent we're the authors of our own fate. But you know what, I just want to say to Steve's ghost, I get it, I understand it, I don't excuse it, but damn it, I understand it.
I hear you. I think you've stated it perfectly, so no need to email Greg, ladies and gentlemen. He understands, he doesn't approve, okay? And that's a lot of times when I have people on the program, they'll be coming from a position that I don't agree with, and I'll say, yeah, right. That doesn't mean I agree. It means I understand what you're saying. It's real simple.
You're listening.
That's right.
Yeah. I
hear you. I'm listening. So,
you know, it was, if you went to a school that was decent, you would have read Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And this salesman, a good man, frustrated, and, you know, he loses his job, he's kind of thrown away by the system, and he commits suicide. And there's just one thing at the end, the phrase you can't forget is, attention must be paid. We cannot continue this class war without assuming someone's going to shoot back. We cannot continue a class war without assuming that we're going to have victims with severe PTSD. It's like the kids in my school that came back from Vietnam. If they go berserk, everyone says, well, they were in Nam. But you know what? If you were in Sun Valley and you were pushed against the wall and were given no way out, that's your Vietnam. And again, not excusing, I got to keep saying that, but please understand it. And what's happening now is it's getting worse. The class war is worse. They get, like I said, they get the gold mine, they get the shaft. They choose our candidates they pick the candidates, and we get to choose what they've picked for us. We got a choice of a psychopathic, narcissist, rich dick, and Donald Trump. Those are our two choices, right?
That's funny. That's funny.
You know? And, except that it's the truth, ain't it?
Yeah, there's some real truth in there, that's for sure. Do you think, and as a journalist, I got to ask this, do you think that absolutely, unequivocally, no question whatsoever, that he acted 100% alone? The remarks of sheriffs... No way.
You know why?
Why?
You know why? And I knew, that's the other reason I knew it was Steve for sure. Next to the window, he had a bunch of calculations, ballistics calculations, and that would have required some really sharp knowledge of trigonometry and calculus, which we didn't have at our school. And so Steve, you know, like he was a math whiz, and to the end, so he had all the trajectories of the you know, because he's shooting at a long distance. By the way, I'm not admiring this, you know, I mean, but you know, he used unfortunately, used his big brain to figure out how to get those bullets to land where they're supposed to.
400 yards or something. This is crazy. At
least, believe me, this is not admirable. It is, but, you know.
It's the devil's work.
Steve written all over it, you know.
Very interesting. All right. Okay. Anything you want to add, Greg? Anything else?
Yeah. If you watch the film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, if you know the actress Shailene Woodley, who played Triss in the Divergent series, and she Snowden's girlfriend. Anyway, Triss, the character Triss from the Divergent series, in my film, I just give up. I'm an investigative reporter. I just can't stand it anymore because I can't reach the mainstream media. Jeff, you let me on your show. Bless you. And he's, really, you're a hero for breaking the omerta. But I can't break it. So I kind of give up. But then I'm watching TV in that Joe's Papaya hot dog stand in New York, and I'm watching the Divergent thing, and suddenly the character Shailene Woodley says, Greg, it's time to go home. And Shailene takes me back to Sun Valley through time and space. And I walk down my street, and I walk down Steve's street and see the guys who were semi-homeless who worked at GM. And just
Jesus, you went home again in the movie. You went home again in the movie. I haven't seen it.
And,
that's fascinating.
And so you got to see it. Wait till the new version comes out next week. Just go to gregpalast.com. You can download it. We'll figure it out. But here's the thing. You go. So she takes me, and then she says to me, the spirit, which is of course my kind of a little bit wasted brain talking to me. So Shailene Woodley, the actress, she's in this character that I've made up in my head is. She says, I said, I can't stand it anymore. I can't stand the way the system's rigged. I just don't want to deal with it anymore. She says, yeah, but you got to talk about these people. You got to talk about what happened to them. And if you don't speak for them, who will? And the answer is, now we know, Steve will speak with a gun. Mm-hmm. I'd rather speak with the facts. And so I actually, in that film, so now you ask me, I've had a very good life. I've had an extraordinary life, okay? I worked for BBC and The Guardian, Rolling Stone. I travel all over the world.
You've had an amazing life.
Hotshot, investigative reporter, all that jazz, bestsellers, right? Here's the thing.
Best hat in the business.
And best hat. I get to wear all these cool hats, these fedoras. Though I got that because I was poor, because I could afford 50-cent old hats.
That's funny.
But the thing was, that's how I started with them. But the thing is, I've always been scarred, and I've always been angry and resentful. But I had a way to express it. I can take movie stars can take me back, With Steve, it just blew up in his head. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone who goes through that ends up crazy killing people or an investigative reporter. People...
Hey, I had a tough life too, my friend. We both did. A lot of listeners have.
I didn't invent tough living, nor did Steve. I just want to say that people, he was being dismissed. They said, we don't understand it. He's a rich guy. He wasn't rich. And so a rich white guy does not fit into our idea of, he wasn't a crazy Vietnam vet, and he isn't, and there's no black rage. So what is the answer? The answer is that white rage of the frustrated kid who was a loser in the class war. And by the way, and that's why a lot of those people, a lot of my old white friends would be Trump voters, because that's how they express their rage. It's silly, but what are they going to do? Vote for Hillary Clinton? So
Yeah. Did he, as a kid, when you guys were young, I said kids, high schoolers, whatever.
Kids. We were kids. You remember we were kids, right? And including high, but even down to second grade. But go ahead.
Did you?
When we were kids.
Did he laugh much? What kind of a personality did he have? Was he pretty well introverted, introspective,
very
glum? You could see that darkness around him, kind of walking in a dark cloud, kind of a kid.
I wouldn't say that I recognized darkness, because I probably didn't recognize darkness. And I got to tell you, despite the fact that I talk about being scarred by it, I even go back in the movie and I'm still angry about it. I'm angry about what happened to the people around me. To be very honest, it's where I grew up. I was a very happy kid. I had a happy childhood, but I was also very gregarious, and he was just the opposite. In other words, so I had lots of human contact, and he was really closed in. He was on the tennis team, so it's not like he was some weird brooding guy in the corner. But I would assume, like I said, he wasn't the only guy who had a dad in prison. But the kids who did have dads in prison meant that they didn't have their families, and it was tough, and they were tended to be a little ashamed. He was a bit short of food. This is before food stamps, remember?
Yeah.
We had a lot of kids at my school
he had
who showed up at school hungry.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I understand that. I did, too. I didn't starve, but I was often hungry. Now, he had a family of, what, four brothers or something like that.
I think there was 2 brothers and I only know of...
Anyway, 3 kids.
Yeah, and I don't remember, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember the others at all.
Right.
I just remember that Steve, was like, a nice kid, quiet kid, really, really bright kid, because we know that, and so therefore we had a lot of classes.
Okay, now you just said something, hold on. You said, and I'm not trying to glorify the guy, but you just said he was a nice kid. He was a nice kid. Yeah. So he was a nice kid. He was shy.
He wasn't a mean bastard at all.
Yeah.
He didn't, torture little puppies.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you see him walking off by himself going home at the end of the day? That kind of thing?
Well, because, it's interesting. I kind of constructed that backwards because when we talked to everyone had the same reaction. Everyone had the same reaction. Like, yeah, Steve, were you close with Steve? No. Know anyone close with Steve? No. I can't find anyone. Everyone knew him, but no one was close to him. And, I think, obviously, so there were other things than just where he grew up and his straitened circumstance, father in prison. I mean, it's tough stuff, single mom, all that. But he, like I said, not everyone picked up a gun.
This is interesting. Did anybody else you talked to from the high school, the Polytech days, did anyone give you anything today or since this has happened about his life? So, yeah, I ran into him once 15 years ago, or I heard he was doing this or that 15. Did any kind of connectivity like that?
No, because he did the expected thing, the kind of dull expected thing. If you were a smarter kid, you went to Lockheed and became a draftsman or a low-level engineer, which is what happened to him.
Right.
And so it was kind of the non-life, so those of us, and I'll be very honest, I kind of, because I escaped, I kind of stayed away from those kids in contact with them for a while because I had it's this weird, strange fear. And if you said you grew up in straitened circumstance, you almost have like this weird sense that this icy hand is going to grab you and saying, you're going back to Sun Valley, you're going to work at GM Palast. That one wrong move, even just looking back, like in the Bible, when Lot's wife turns around and you're not supposed to look back. She looks back and turns into a pillar of salt. That was kind of me. So for a while, I refused to, even when my parents are still there, I said, I'm not going back. I don't want anything to do with anyone there. I don't want anything to do with it. So I kind of disconnected. And later, I realized how important, then I started really hunting for people, not just this week, but a few years later when I realized this is what shaped me and what happened to everyone. So I started really hunting for people and to see what happened, and lots of people were harmed, frustrated in what they wanted to do because they didn't have the connections, the money, the schools, the open doors. But some people, figured out a way out and a way around. Like
you think, okay, yeah. Now, this kid, I'm getting a real good profile of what you're explaining it very well. It seems to me that he would have potentially been able to figure out how to get out of the mayonnaise jar and to rise up to the top somehow. But he didn't.
Well, what I've read, and now I'm going by what I've read.
Yes.
He seemed to be, because he was like so many of us without money, he seemed to be obsessed with not like doing something, like not wanting to become a math professor, but rather using his brains. He wanted to make money, so with that kind of money that's the great equalizer, and that's the power trip. Money, I got money, I'm a success. And he was looking for quick money, and that's where gambling addiction kind of took hold. And, I had friends when I didn't go to Stanford, I went to Chicago, and I had friends who wanted to become math professors, but they came out of high schools that had all this advanced stuff. And
well, they
so
were fast-tracked. I understand, sure.
Yeah, they got captured by this. They had all this amazing training. A lot of them went to college, colleges while they were in high school. I worked out that gimmick for myself, too. But, and they had all these, so they were already using their brains in the best way. Steve I have to say, he didn't seem like he had a hell of a lot of imagination. But that's my conclusion.
Well,
I think that
I see.
who knows what other things happened, and obviously I emphasize that anyone who, some people have written to me who've read my article at gregpalast.com or saw me on Tom Hartman, they'll say, well, not everyone who went to your school started killing people, and you didn't. What's his excuse? There's no excuse. And
no one's trying to make you're not trying to make an excuse. Come on. It's not the issue here. It happened. And
I'm a friend of Jesse Jackson, and who talked a lot about goes to high schools and stuff and tells kids have them repeat I am somebody. Mm-hmm. And what he's saying is okay, it's tough. He grew up really poor in South Carolina, and okay, don't whine, figure it out, and just. I don't, it's not, so, there are ways out, but you know what? Don't expect that everyone's going to make it out and we're the authors of our own fate. I mean, I'll never forget, I think one of the times when I decided I really hated George Bush, and I'm glad I didn't have an AR-15 in my hand in close proximity, it was actually just before 9/11. Uh-huh. And remember, he was in the Texas schools, and he was, reading My Friendly Goat or whatever when the attack happened. But it was a few days before that, and he went to a school of Chicano kids, like the school I was at, and he told those kids, he said, well, study hard, and you'll do well. He says, but, I was a C student, and I still got into Yale, and he started chuckling.
All right.
Why was that bastard chuckling? His grandpa was on the Yale Board of Trustees. And so that dumbbell got to go to Yale. That dumbbell got out of Vietnam. And then that dumbbell took the rest of the kids, the rest of us, and sent us to Iraq. Thank you. So that's what I hate. I hate the privileged bastards. On the other hand, there are some people who've used their privilege in a decent way, so, it's not automatic.
We can't lump everybody into any group like that. Here's something I want to just play. Let me play a little of this. Sure. This is Eric Paddock. Now, you've seen these. I just want to get your take on it. I don't know. I'm just jumping in here at some place.
Sure.
So here we go.
Sure.
Wife. Her husband was an asshole, a total asshole. He ran off, left her with 4 kids. She raised 4 kids on a secretary salary in the 60s and 70s.
He's talking about their mother.
Yes.
And some of us weren't real good kids. I mean, you guys are probably going to investigate me. I wasn't a wonderful human being when I was a kid. We were bad kids. Okay? That's, at some level. We were troublesome kids. We grew up poor on the side of the freeway in the San Fernando Valley in California. I don't want to, I don't want to go too much into this, but how we were formed. We're just people. My mom has had a tough life, and here's where it goes in, where it branches into Steve, the Steve that we knew. Steve made my mom wealthy. He's the reason why he's not the only reason. She did this herself, a lot of it, okay? But he helped make her retirement very comfortable. He's the reason she's very, very comfortable right now. She wouldn't have been as comfortable because you don't make much money as a secretary in the 70s, raising 4 kids, okay? Steve is the reason that she has substantial funds right now and is comfortable. That's the Steve I know. Okay. Now the other thing is someone said that Steve transferred $100,000. Woo, $100,000. We're wealthy people. $100,000 isn't that much money, and I'm sorry if that hurts people or something, but $100,000 isn't that huge amount of money. He gambled that much through a machine in hours. I mean, once again, you need to understand. That's what people need to understand, the level where some people live. I guess everybody thinks that everybody works at Taco Bell or something. Everybody doesn't work at Taco Bell. There's wealthy people who do this. If you're going to condemn Steve for being a high-stakes gambler, the hotels are not going to be very happy with you. Go find everybody and interview them who has a card. If you're going to call Steve crazy for gambling the way he gambles, go find everybody at the hotels who have the hotels tell you, everybody who's got a gold, he's got the highest level of membership card at a lot of these hotels. If these hotels say they don't know Steve, they're lying.
But would that transfer indicate some sort of forethought, you think, maybe? Or was that, did he routinely send her money of the...
My mom? Or Marianne? Mary Lou? I'm sorry. Steve took care of the people he loved. He helped make me and my family wealthy. I mean, he's the reason I was able to retire. 3 years ago when I got really burnt out doing the job I did. I mean, this is the Steve we know, we knew.
Okay, you get the message he's trying to bring across there.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, a few things. I mean, everyone's groping in the dark, even his brother.
7 years younger. 7 years.
Yeah, and I was wondering why I never knew Eric. I guess I didn't realize he was 7
That's right.
younger. And, so we both graduated in 70. And obviously he's talking about being very scarred by how he grew up. And no, I don't think Steve was I don't remember Steve being a bad kid. He was like I say, quiet. I mean, maybe his younger brother got into trouble that I don't know about. But
well, he did reflect what you're describing Sun Valley and that existence like clearly.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. But like I say, in Steve's case, it's a matter of frustration, that he could have had something better, should have had something better. I think, and like I say, he took his Lockheed money and put it into L.A. real estate. He had these crappy buildings. He'd live in an apartment himself. He'd take care of them. And, just standing still, real estate makes money. His brother he took his brother's money and put it into these buildings, and then his mother's money, and they obviously weren't compulsive gamblers, so they kept the money. And I don't think that anyone, from many reports, that these people would be considered wealthy, but they could actually survive on the rents and the money that he hooked them into. Obviously, from your the calculations about. He certainly, I don't know, I can't verify them. He ran through an awful lot of money to whatever he had. Addictive gamblers don't win, they lose. The idea that you have
of course.
Brilliant professional
you start
gambler,
winning,
he loses
they're going to escort
big,
you off the property real quick. You're gone.
Yeah, and they don't give you free rooms because you take money from them. You give money to them. So whatever he was sucking in from his rents, and like he had this place in Mesquite, Reno, which it looks pretty grim, his little place. The guy was not living large. But his obviously, I think, I think he felt that his mother was so abused by the system and by his father that he did one wonderful thing. He took
Apparently
care of
took care of her, and the brother. I said the brother's talking like they got nothing to worry about. They're set up. I did see the home in Reno. Very nice home in Reno in a senior gated community. I didn't see the Mesquite house, which I think you're talking about. Probably less so, but the Reno house was nice. Did he own it? I don't know. Did he rent it?
I don't know. We don't know either. Like I say, most of these gamblers, addicted gamblers, I had one in my family. They hawk up everything to the eyeballs, and usually they lie about it and mortgage the same place twice. So it's hard to say, and I'm an investigator. I do financial investigations, and
I'm going to send you an article.
Report. That's what I did,
yeah.
and so I have to look at the numbers, but. I think, again, my point is simple. We have a lot of Steves out there. They don't all pick up guns, but they're frustrated and angry, and they act out in many ways to get even. And, sometimes it's as simple as voting for Trump, and sometimes it's as simple as beating their wives or getting drunk, and sometimes it's that they really do become rich investment bankers and just nasty rich bastards because, they were abused and they pass it down.
Yeah, we got all of those.
Yeah, so, I don't, but I just want people to be aware that he was a victim of the class war, and that's what it comes down to.
All right, here's just a couple more minutes of Eric. Let's see what else he brings out here. I really am fascinated with your response and your comments tonight. This is amazing. Hold on. Here we go.
The people he loved, he took care of. He didn't have a lot of friends. He was a private person. There's a story about that he kept his windows, his shades closed, and he didn't talk to me for the first 3 times he saw me walking in the neighborhood. Wow. That makes him really weird, doesn't it? He was a private guy. That's why you can't find out anything about him. That's why there's no pictures. Is he such a weirdo because he didn't have a Facebook page and posted 50,000 damn pictures of himself every day? Who's weird?
Can you sympathize that people are maybe grasping for any sort of explanation?
Believe me, I sympathize with everybody who's grasping. Who on this planet do you think is grasping for this understanding more than me? Okay? Once again, my heart goes out. My son called me today and he cried on the... He's just crushed by this. And it has nothing to do with him. Nothing. But he's just totally crushed by this. And this is why I'm not a crying kind of guy. I'm an old school kind of guy. My wife stayed home and raised my kids. I went out and earned the money. I'm an old school kind of guy. I'm the guy who takes care of everybody else. This crying thing is not my normal gig. Okay? I can't even process this yet, really. It's just started. I woke up this morning crying. It's like, okay, today it's being noticed.
Okay. That's Eric Paddock. Family of 4 kids. Yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's kind of something that just doesn't wash. That his brother wasn't a strange, weird guy, but one day he woke up, or a couple months before this event, he woke up one day and said, let me buy 14 weapons and a lot of high-velocity ammunition and figure out what it would take to
You know what I hear, Greg?
Scores of people.
You know what I hear? I hear he's almost too perplexed, and that's kind of a little alarm for me. He talked to his brother often. I don't buy it. There's something wrong. I completely concur with you.
I think too is remember this. Okay, number one, his brother was on anti-anxiety medications. That means that he was deeply unhappy. And by the way, Eric, the younger brother, he left his work for psychological reasons. He had his own depressions and difficulties. I'm telling you, and I know other things happen in life, but you don't need a PhD in psychology to know that when you grow up in those tough circumstances, there are scars, and they don't get washed away. We understand it when people go to Vietnam and 50 years later act out and shoot someone. They go, oh well, he was a Vietnam vet. But the PTSD is a long-lasting thing. So, first of all, his brother was on anti-anxiety medications. If that became public knowledge to journalists, he would have known. He knew that he
absolutely would have known.
And so this is a very deeply unhappy guy. And of course, and by the way, again, this is a little bit, pop psychology, but he has that survivor issue, which is that, it's kind of like, well, why didn't you pick up the signals? Why didn't you stop him? And so he's kind of saying, well, my brother was really normal just because he lived with the shades down and no furniture in his house and didn't talk to anyone.
Right.
that's normal just because he didn't have a Facebook page. Like I said, looking back, I mean, none of our friends really had conversations with this guy. He basically was in a cloud of silence in school. I mean, how could I go to? I mean, very frankly, I had conversations with him. And he in class, he was a kid who would raise his hand and know all the answers, and sharp, but not gregarious, not like, hey, let's hang out.
Right.
And I was the opposite. I was like, so I tended to talk to everyone, and the fact that I can't really remember much more than in-class conversations with this guy, he was pretty tight in, and things were obviously eating at him and never stopped eating through his life. So, I don't know, like I say, it scarred me enough that I actually had to put a scene from Sun Valley in my film because I had it left, but my reaction was to make a movie about it, not to see how many people I could take with me.
I look forward to seeing it when it comes out. What, next week you said?
Next week
version?
at GregPalast.com, you can get the kind of pre-release versions of
Very
it.
good. Greg, really fascinating hour. Thank you. That was terrific.
Jeff, you're the man. Thank you, and I'm going to get a copy of this and post it because I think that this is the best. I've had a lot of interviews. This is the most explanatory and deep conversation I've had yet.
I'll send you a sound file tonight.
Thank you so much. Okay, good night.
Take care. Greg Palast. And there's an hour for you to think about. We'll be right back.